Well, hello, everybody. And as you can see, Tamsin and I are in the same place for a change. I wanted to say thank you for participating. I'm really grateful to Jayati and Imran for agreeing to tell us a little bit more about this absolutely consequential report and the recommendations it's made about inequality. And obviously, we're hoping that they can tell us what the state of play is. It's clearly something that is resonating a lot with people because we have a very large number of people that have registered for this. I won't do a lot of introduction, although I know both of them deserve a proper introduction, but I'm going to, with their permission, skip that. Please look them up. They are both very eminent. My instinct is to just get right into this and talk about some of the recommendations in the report. And as Tamsin has said, Tamsin has a propensity, I will confess right now, to look at who's putting in comments and then directing questions to those people. So if you want to say something, please put something in the comments. And with no further ado, I'm going to go first to Imran and say, Imran, please go ahead and just tell us a little bit about the report and how you see it and what you see the next phase feeling and looking like. Thank you for doing this.
Right. Well, thank you so much to the two of you for kind of organizing this, and it's really fantastic to see so many friends on this call. So kind of great to see you all. So the kind of background to the report is that kind of South Africa chaired the G20 last year. And one of the themes of the G20 kind of hosting by South Africa was the issue of inequality. One particular aspect of that theme was the kind of appointment of our panel kind of under the chairmanship of Joseph Stiglitz. And our task was to kind of prepare a report on the state of global inequality, to look at what are the key trends, what are the factors driving these trends, what are the kind of implications of these high levels of inequality, and then to make some policy recommendations on what we think ought to be done. The reports in the public domain, so you all have access access to it. I'll kind of raise a few highlights and then pass on to Jayati to raise a few issues that might points that she thinks are worth kind of highlighting in the report. So just in terms of the kind of overall trends, I think there's three broad sort of trends that are worth emphasizing. The first is that over the last sort of 25 years, in fact, kind of global inequality has fallen, but I think we shouldn't make too much of that, because that's kind of really driven by the rise in incomes in China, which because of its size has kind of really shifted kind of what the global picture looks like. I think what's striking about it is that the growth in kind of inequality in wealth has been particularly striking. And if we take the total output growth for kind of over the 25-year period, and we kind of allocate the wealth generated out of that kind of growth in wealth by income classes across the world. The striking pattern that comes out is that the top 1% across the kind of across the world have received about 43% of that total growth in kind of in wealth. And if you contrast that, the bottom half of the world's population has received kind of just a single percentage point of that growth in output. I think you'll all kind of agree with me or kind of agree with us that pattern of kind of accumulation and distribution of wealth is really kind of something we haven't ever seen before in history, and it's really not at all sustainable. We argue in the report. I think another point about the trends that's emphasized in the report is we can split this growth in wealth between wealth that is held in public hands and wealth that is held in private hands. And if we do that split, the wealth sitting in public hands has, over this kind of 25-year period, remained static. So it's kind of really not grown at all. And if you take the wealth that is sitting in private hands, if we take 1980 as the base year and we index it, then private wealth would have been sitting kind of below an index of 100. It is now sitting close to an index kind of in the order of 500. So we've had a 5-fold increase in kind of in wealth that is sitting in kind of private hands. And I think what we draw out in the report is that in this kind of period across the global economy, you've seen massive sort of concentrations of wealth in a small elite in the private sector. And I think that we highlight in the report has some huge kind of implications and consequences for how our kind of economies perform. I think the one last point I would want to make in kind of highlighting one point about the consequences is that we kind of emphasize in the report that this concentration of wealth kind of in a few hands is not good for a whole kind of host of reasons, and I'm sure Jayati will kind of expand on that. I want to just kind of emphasize one point, that it's really not good for economics. So it's not good economic policy. It's not the sign of a healthy economy, and it's not kind of really in the interest of global economic growth that we should have such extreme concentrations of wealth. So with that, let me pass it on to Jayati.
Thank you, and such a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you so much for organizing this. I think Imran has already told you some of the main findings in terms of the outcomes that we're seeing. And I noticed that someone in the chat had said, well, this is inherent in capitalism. It is an unequal system. What is remarkable is how much it has increased in the last 3 decades, because there are different phases of capitalism. It's not always the same, and it's not always the same in different countries or economies. So, what we have also tried to look at are the drivers of this inequality. And so, precisely as Imran has argued, the fact of this extreme wealth is actually self-regenerating. It is something that has a forward momentum because the extremely wealthy also have extremely powerful abilities to affect laws, to affect, regulations, to affect policies in their own favor. And that is what we have seen across the world. We have actually seen more and more governments responding to the, not requirements, but the desires of the extremely wealthy. And now we're not talking even about the moderately wealthy or the what we would have earlier called wealthy, the millionaires. We are talking about centimillionaires, billionaires. And the power, we are probably witnessing the most extreme concentration of wealth and power in global human history. In terms of global, we are now seeing, one person has the ability to buy up an entire, what we used to think of as a public platform for conversation, the public square, and shift it into his own directions. That same person also owns more than half the satellites circling around the globe. This kind of power is actually globally unprecedented. Now, this is not an accident. It's really because of the policies and regulations that have been put in place by governments and in the international architecture. So, a significant part of our report is actually looking at these drivers. And we identify a range, what are called, pre-distribution, that is to say, before governments get into fiscal policy. But just in terms of the frameworks that enable, whether they are intellectual property rights or they are regulations that enable large capital and large multinational corporations to expand in whatever way without regard to human rights, with regard to in the environment or the requirements of the planet, etc. That kind of, I won't call it deregulation, but specifically regulation favoring large capital has been a major cause of this. In addition, it has enabled much greater expansion of what you could call rentier capitalism, finance capital, which is operating as it pleases. So we can say what we like about greening economies, most private finance is still going in the opposite direction, and so on. All of this in turn affects employment. So in some countries like my own, India, we have not had the expansion of employment despite 3 decades of supposedly high growth. We don't get the expansion of what you would really call proper employment or good jobs at all. In other countries, you're finding more and more fragile employment. So the outcomes actually reflect these drivers. And then they reinforce each other. So you can see how all of this is so sort of self-reinforcing, which is why we are calling it an inequality emergency. Because the fact is that the significant power that is held by the extremely wealthy enables them to perpetuate the system and even accentuate it. And with AI, we're going to see, and even privately held AI in particular, we're going to see an even greater increase in this inequality. So this, in turn, final couple of points, this actually combines with pre-existing forms of inequality, what many people here will recognize as intersectionality. Inequalities of race, of gender, in my country, of caste, of location, where you happen to be, and so on. Migrant status, all of these inequalities interact with that broader one to create segmented labor markets, segmented markets for access to credit and assets and everything, which again reinforce each other. So capitalism uses the existing structures. Now, the important thing to remember is that all of these are the result of policy choices. They are political choices. They are not inevitable. It's not, oh, yes, we have capitalism, so we just stuck with this. It's not true. Capitalism has actually done this in the past. It has regulated, it has brought down inequalities. In some countries, it has actually enabled a dramatic reduction in inequalities. You can think of Scandinavia, for example, and some of the Latin American countries in the more recent past. It is possible to undo these things. So what I have described as the drivers, you can also undo those drivers by shifting policies in the opposite direction. And so one of our, if you like, main proposals, because we recognize that these are wish lists that are not necessarily easy to fulfill politically, one of our important proposals is the creation of an international panel on inequality, because just like the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, actually brought public attention to the matter, created greater awareness, made sure that people, societies, governments everywhere were conscious of this and had to do something about it. We feel that an international panel on inequality will also generate the kind of public attention that we need to reverse these processes. And so, we can talk much more about that. But broadly speaking, we do have a set of recommendations, both at national and international level, about the kinds of policies that can be brought in to change what we are observing. But we do feel that an important first step is actually this international panel, which would create the groundwork for moving on with the kinds of things we need to do to reduce this obscene inequality.
Thank you both for really setting the context so carefully and well. One thing I'm wondering about is the gravitational pull of the North and South, of the global North and the global South, and how the report has been received. So I don't know, since the report has come out, could you bring us up to speed on how people are reacting, whether there's a momentum building up, how people are reacting to the recommendations you're making? One of the things I worry about is gravity and how gravity works in our world.
So kind of our sense is that there's been a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and support for the report. So shortly after the report was published, there was a kind of group of about 700 kind of economists and social scientists and kind of academics and policy makers across the world that have endorsed the report, but also kind of supported the idea of kind of setting up this international panel on inequality. There's also been, since then, a fair amount of political momentum to take forward the kind of idea of setting up this international panel. So at the political level, lots of support, kind of course, from the President of South Africa, the kind of President of Spain, the kind of President of Brazil, Lula, and also the Prime Minister of Norway. So I think across the world, global North and global South, I think kind of an acknowledgement that this is a global emergency, and that it has to be dealt with at the global level. The kind of political support has been there, and kind of our committee has been expanded into being a founding committee to actually do the work to kind of establish the IPI. As things stand, we've had two fairly extensive meetings of the founding committee, and a group that's been called the consultative committee. This is a group of experts who work on inequality across the world, who've been advising us and kind of supporting the founding committee. So we have a meeting, in fact, this weekend, kind of in Johannesburg, where we are going to work through some of the technical issues around how one would actually kind of set up such an institution. Should this be an institution that should be just kind of academic? Should it be linked into the UN system? Kind of how do we ensure that there's policy impact kind of at the global level? So these are the sorts of questions that we're going to be dealing with in the next few days. And I'm sure Jayati has something to add on this.
Yeah, well, in terms of the progress made so far, I think we should also just mention that very recently in Spain, in Barcelona, there was a meeting of progressive leaders, and 42 governments actually signed up to the declaration, which explicitly included support for an international panel on inequality and recognizing that there is an inequality emergency. And I think a number of other leaders currently in opposition in many countries were also there. And so that also is an important positive indicator. Having said that, I don't want to minimize the extent of the opposition. I think we have to recognize that there is already pushback, that, the extremely powerful and extremely wealthy don't just say, okay, fine, we'll give it all up, we'll allow you to take, it doesn't happen. I should also mention, by the way, that the African resolution in February, led by South Africa, the African Union actually had a resolution that supported this international panel and said that we really have to do things about this. But yes, there is a lot of existing pushback. And there is, let's face it, there is a lot of double talk among governments as well, especially when it comes to international relations. We can't pretend that it doesn't exist. So in the international architecture, even in the tax negotiations, we see that the same governments who are supporting the panel are not necessarily supporting more equitable tax systems. So it is an uphill struggle, but that is all the more reason why we do need to combine, why we need to put so much more information out there for people to actually learn from and use again to force their own governments to change, to force them to also change in terms of the negotiating positions. We have to recognize also that it's a very bad world for multilateralism right now, given the stance of the US, supported by finally only Argentina and Israel, but nonetheless, it's a group that has a lot of. It can also be confronted if there are sufficiently large coalitions working against that. And we have seen that happen even in the tax negotiations. We are seeing it happen in a number of other ways. So I think we shouldn't be saying, oh my God, it's such a mess. The world is in a terrible state. The supposed, global leader is creating havoc. There are these terrible wars and destruction going on, completely unjustified and unjust. We can stoop into depression, or we can say, no, this is the period when we can change things. And this is a very important step in that direction. For us, I think the surprise has been the degree to which other governments have begun to recognize this. I didn't expect that kind of positive response. Even in the G20 meeting in November, no, Imraan, I mean, we were actually surprised at the positive response, the subsequent response as well. I think more and more governments are also becoming aware that this is increasingly politically unfeasible, that it's creating such fractured societies that we are going to be in unlivable conditions. And this is quite apart from the other impacts like climate change and the growing material insecurities created by war and so on that are again having unequal impacts. So I think this is a moment. I think we do have to recognize that this is a moment full of risks, but also full of enormous potential if there's sufficient energy to have that kind of push for change.
Thank you for that. That's so powerful. Go ahead.
A point about why we think the IPI might be the timing might be right. I think if we go back, 25, some 25 or more years, and think about when the issue of climate change was first uh, 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 kind of clear from a scientific point of view, how much of resistance there was to kind of actually uh, 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 kind of shifting it from a science space into the kind of economic and social space, which is where the real kind of questions around climate change are. If we contrast that to where we are now, notwithstanding some of the recent denialism from the powerful interests, but I think we would accept that that kind of evidence that is clear, that is robust, and that can stand up to kind of rigorous assessment, does shift kind of thinking across the world. And we think that just like the climate emergency, kind of an IPI which would put out the evidence as kind of as we've done in this report, and really show not only what the trends are, but what the implications of these levels of inequality are, will create momentum for real changes on the economic and the social side.
Thank you. I'm wondering whether we should try and open this up. We have lots of people wanting to come in. Anybody who wants to put their hand up and engage? One of the things I'm curious about, both that I want to have both of you sort of address, is what do you think are the things that a community like this can do to help? What are some of the things that can be done to put this in front of people, to remind people of what the objectives are and the recommendations are, and how do we get more people to recognize that this important report now exists, and we need to use this momentum that you've both identified. But I'm really looking for people to come in on the conversation.
Stephen, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you so much for the report, for your work, and for this webinar. There are big barriers to making the changes you'd like to see. Piketty talked about the longer-term trend toward inequality and capitalism. Is it possible that we cannot make these changes within capitalism, that liberal capitalism is a contradiction in terms, that liberal economics can't work? And if so, do you see any alternatives to capitalism?
Imraan or Jayati, over to
No, why don't you go?
This is something I have spent a large part of my life in economics arguing against capitalism, and in fact, not just the inequality and inequity, unjust nature of the system, but also the sort of stupidity of this system, especially late capitalism. But I increasingly recognize that change doesn't happen with one big shift. It happens through different things moving together. And we have to think of the different things that will actually move to a new system. And so I would argue that, yes, I completely agree with Stephen that, broadly speaking, it doesn't happen with just, capitalism the way we understand it. But to begin to change it, we have to begin by controlling, reining in the forces that are perpetuating it to that degree. And so we have to actually bring in changes which may seem small, but cumulatively add up to ways that actually ensure the dignity of working life and people. I think Marty Chen raised a very important point. It's in the report as well that, the fragility of people's lives is directly related to the dramatic increase in inequality and the greater power and wealth of another group. So to do all of that, there's a range of things that are done, which if you put them together, they end up sounding like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which frankly to me is socialism.
If I could just add two thoughts on Steve's question, I think we kind of highlight in the report that the kind of outcomes that we're seeing in terms of these kind of concentrations of wealth are sort of largely driven by a set of economic policy choices that have been made. I think we can have big debates about capitalism and its alternatives, but I think what's quite clear from the report is that these are certain economic policy choices that have been made, and there's no inevitability about those choices. We have a choice about these things. The second point which we emphasize in the report is kind of even on strictly on kind of criteria that you would use from a liberal economics perspective, even if that's your framework, the patterns that we're seeing kind of around inequality are not economically sensible, even in that framework. So I think even if you were in that world, this is not an efficient way for us to run economic systems, and there's a trade-off here to efficiency, which I think is an important point to emphasize.
So, Laura, you had your hand up. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Jerry, and thanks to Imraan and Jayati. I guess I'm sort of, I think Marty made the point in the chat, but I think it's worth just reinforcing. I think being focused on the informal economy, we've sort of taken a anti-poverty, sort of a poverty alleviation approach to the question. And sometimes I think we don't see ourselves in the inequality debates because the inequality discussion tends to focus on targeting the wealthy and targeting the rich. And so I think trying to do both at the same time is really important, and thinking about what that means. And then one area that I think, like concrete area that is super important that you could look at from both angles is public procurement, right? Because that is where so many informal sector workers and their enterprises are excluded. But it seems to me like a major lever for inequality to reinforce itself. If you think about how the tech industry uses public procurement, or has used public procurement in the US and and in other countries, India as well, to reinforce its dominance. So not having read the report, I just wondered if Imraan and Jayati had any reflections on public procurement as one of the levers for reinforcing inequality.
And we'll take one more comment before we go back to Imraan and Jayati. Kaminshi Naidu, go ahead.
Thank you. I've gone through the report in a lot of detail, and the thing that I particularly like about it is that it's defined the swim lanes for inequality and inequality research particularly well. And I think a few reflections it's perhaps worthwhile to look at financial inclusion, which had gained the same amount of momentum through the Maya Declaration. Governments got behind it, but I faced an uphill battle. So I think my caution would be around gear up for the battle. I took a humanist approach. I took a fundamentally different approach to the World Bank, and it was a highly contentious battle and quite a miserable experience around putting human lives and livelihoods at the forefront of the conversation, even when I took a market economics lens. And I have that experience. I'm very, very happy to share it with you. I have very strong thoughts about where to put it into the multilateral system, given my experience sitting inside them. That would be the one thing. The other thing that I quite liked, you talked about data, but if you're thinking about an IPI, consider the collection of micro data. A country like the DRC, they barely have a functioning statistics office. I literally have the only nationally representative set of data on household livelihoods. It didn't exist. Mali, Cambodia, Laos, a lot of the countries where inequality is quite high, and you're looking at growth pathways for the vulnerable and the low income, you're going to need that micro data. The large panel data that you mentioned in the report, it exists. I have a lot of the micro data, but you need to put investment and funding. You need to capacitate governments to be able to work with you around that data. And capacitating governments means working with those national statistics offices, whether it's Togo. But I have detailed comments, and I'm happy to share it with you.
Please do, and please put some, if you have anything you can share, please put it into the chat. So I'm going back to you, Imraan and Jayati, if you want to respond to any of this.
Jayati, you want to go first, and then I'll.
Yeah, sure. Okay, very quickly. So, Laura, I completely agree with you. We do actually discuss public procurement also, and we are very conscious of the impact of, inequality on poverty. What we wanted to emphasize, however, is that they are really two sides of that same process, that coin, if you like. And so it's not, a lot of the focus of the international institutions like the World Bank is poverty reduction, as if it's something you can do separately. And we actually dispute that. It is not something you can just do separately. You can't just improve the lives of the poor, especially through little tweaks and nudges and, the kind of thing that have become so popular today. That these are strategies, these are policies, these are regulatory practices, these are institutions that operate to make certain people's lives more fragile, more insecure, more materially almost impossible. And then make them much less resilient to facing shocks, which at the same time are enriching the people who are benefiting from not just all the policies, but also the shocks as well. So I think really the reason we have emphasized the rich is because the multilateral institutions don't want to talk about those. They want to talk only about, let's do something nice for the poor. Whereas we're saying, no, these are systemic, these are structural. I think that's, but we do recognize public procurement is one of the things that we have mentioned in the longer report as well. Not perhaps in the summary, but in the longer report. Yeah, the other thing is she's so many useful points here. And I really do take your point about the microdata, because there is the other problem, which we have slightly noted. It's not just microdata, even the big survey data. Let's face it, a lot of governments try to influence that. A lot of governments don't want to get real data out. I am not going to name names, but I happen to come from one. Okay, we actually do have to worry about the reliability and validity of a lot of the data that is fed into the international system. And so that's why one of the streams we're envisaging is particularly looking at different data sources, checking the viability, reliability, consistency, how much you can be comparing one against the other, and all of that. We are imagining 4 different work streams. One is about the whole data issue. One is about the drivers. One is about the consequences. And one is about the kinds of policies that are required. So we are thinking, but of course this can change. This is just the very preliminary part. These can change over time in terms of how these develop. I would really strongly hope that people like Kaminshi are involved, because remember, the IPI is the voluntary work of thousands of researchers all over the world. And that's what we are hoping the IPI will be. It will be based on voluntary work of thousands of researchers. We already have 700 who have committed. I'm hoping Kameshni and others are going to be involved in this, that, be part of a working group that actually contributes knowledge to this, because that's what this exercise is meant to do and to deliver.
Just one point to add to what Jayati said on the question that Laura raised. I kind of emphasized a point in the report about the kind of the growing the growth in wealth that is sitting in private hands, and the static nature of wealth and income that is sitting in sort of public hands. We've lived in the past through kind of humankind has lived through periods where kind of our capacity to kind of grow output has resulted in a much larger share of that output going into public spaces. I think what we're living in this period is a fundamental kind of change in how the benefits of the work that all of humankind does is being concentrated in kind of in a few hands, and large amounts of it, as you highlight, Laura, is work that is done in the public sector. So we're transferring a huge amount of wealth and public wealth from publicly held institutions to privately held institutions. And I think the procurement system is a really key part of that process. So kind of thank you for highlighting that. Just wanted to say also on the points that Cami raised, I think part of the reason why we want to have this group looking at the data and the measurement question is that we recognize that although there's been a fantastic amount of work that's been done in the last while on the measurement of inequality, there are still huge gaps in our understanding of kind of this, and large numbers of sort of countries where you simply don't have the data. So a key part of that working group's agenda would be to try to standardize things across countries, to build kind of learning framework so that statistical agencies can do this in a consistent way, so we can compare things across countries in a fairly standardized way, and that the whole kind of area of measurement and data is done in a much more kind of open and transparent way. I think if we all kind of understand these issues and it's in the public spaces, I think there's a lot more possibility that society can push our governments to be doing a lot more about this. And just to use the opportunity to answer kind of Jerry's question, what can people in this group do? I think really to kind of publicize the report, but I think we would also find it extremely valuable to get your thoughts on the IPI, on its design, any any support that you can provide, kind of areas that we might not be aware of that should be brought into the purview of the IPI. I think all of those would be really useful contributions.
Well, thank you for that. And I wonder if, Stephen, you're still wanting to speak. I know you've been very patient, Stephen Marshall. Go ahead.
Thanks. Okay. All right. So I've been studying, I've been at university working on a degree for about 5 years. And the pattern that I've noticed is that there are local groups, there are international human rights, no growth, pro addressing climate disruption, etc. All these progressive groups, and then there's this long list of international institutions that issue reports, and it seems like there's a fundamental divide between the character of the reports that come out of the progressive side of the ledger. What I'm hearing is that the international agencies always talk about growth. But the thing we have to remember when we hear the word growth is that the benefits do not go to the poor. So it's really a meaningless goal. What we need is to think about how to set up the world, create the world so that poor people can take care of themselves, so that they are no longer the source of extraction, that they become the place where our care is going so that they can, under their own initiative and capacity, which is abundant, can pick themselves up and take care of themselves.
Thank you.
I don't think we need a new economic system. They tried that in the Soviet Union. They're trying to do that in China, and we see that it's not a people's republic. There have been lots and lots of efforts. I mean, I shouldn't start, but there have been lots and lots of efforts.
Let's keep it short. Yeah.
I'm going to trim this off. So there have been lots and lots of efforts to create a system based on some model, and they all fail. What I argue is that what we need is a fundamentally new epistemology of what it means to be a human being. And we say, okay, we're all real, we're all human, we all deserve the respect from each other, and that we need to be thinking about how do we build a world where we can all live in sovereignty for our own lives.
Thank you.
We start there, and the system that we need emerges spontaneously. But anybody who thinks they're going to build a system is kidding themselves.
Thanks, Stephen.
You don't want one system over the whole world, so let's let the people build it.
Okay, thank you. Laura, you had your hand up again?
Thanks. Yeah, I just actually wanted to raise up a point by Safia Khan in the chat around, can we make this panel on inequality different from previous sort of global governance structures? I think the plea was for something intergenerational, and I guess it's just a question to Imraan and Jayati about, are there ideas doing things differently in terms of setting up this panel? And because I know many of us would see this as a sort of place to rally in the struggles we're engaged in. it would be nice to know more about that if possible. Thanks.
Thank you. And Yuan, before we go back to Imraan and Jayati, you have to unmute.
For me, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that find interesting the discussion here, but I'm in a movement for the last 25 years, which is building at the community level, grassroots. We're bringing people together, and they are already building alternatives. They are building their own in India, in Mali, in many countries. There are people building their own cooperatives or other aspects outside the capitalist economy. For example, my friend in Mali says the corporations don't come here. There's no money to be made in Mali, so we're not there. So people have to organize to make their own economy. They're building the microfinance, many other things. So, and civil society in the last 25 years has grown, which is new in our. Previously, people would say, "Let's go to politics, political parties to change the system." That hasn't worked. I agree on that. But the world where, in other words, what we want as an economy is already being built here and there, and many countries support, like Spain or Colombia or many other countries. It's a tough battle, but we don't have any choice. People need to organize to eat, to sleep, and have housing. They just can't depend on Elon Musk or whoever to solve those issues. People can solve those issues locally. And once you have a stronger social movement in a country, then you can influence your own government. It's not going, the changes will not come top down, they come bottom up. If there's nobody at the grassroots in different countries of the world doing things won't change. So this is why we're organizing international networks. And we've been able to influence, even have some countries adopt this resolution of the United States, the United Nations, as I mentioned, recognizing this solidarity economy as an approach, because we say resist and build. We are in the build mode. And we have to resist at the same time, like the report here, it demonstrates that the system is not working for people.
Yep.
So that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you're getting some applause for that. I'm going to go back to Imraan and Jayati to react a bit to all of this.
So maybe a few thoughts from, so Stephen, you've raised an kind of a large number of issues. I'd make two points in response. The first is, I think there's a lot of work going on outside of our report, kind of including by a number of people on this call, that is kind of raising important questions about how much we should focus our attention on kind of simple GDP kind of output numbers, and whether we should be thinking about other kind of indicators of progress, looking at health progress, kind of other socioeconomic indicators. So I think we would see our report as one part of a much larger set of issues that is grappling with these questions. I think there was one point that you raised that I have to say I kind of fundamentally don't agree with, and that was this kind of idea that what we need to do is to let the poor take care of themselves, I think is what you said. I think our report's taking a very different approach. I think what we're highlighting is that the kind of the distributions of power in our economic system, which is what we all need to use to earn the livelihoods that we need, is kind of fundamentally skewed to powerful interests and to a really, really small kind of elite across the world that is able to capture a large part of the work of millions of people. And I think the real problem, and I think there's many people from WIGO on this call, the real problem is that kind of the economy is stacked against those who are kind of who we would think of as poor, and who are struggling against all of these powerful interests to earn a kind of a livelihood that is enough to sustain themselves. So I think it's a more fundamental point about us kind of changing these distributions of power. And I think we kind of emphasize in the report that there's a choice here. We've made choices about how these distributions happen. We've made choices about how power is concentrated, and it really doesn't have to be that way. I think on Laura's kind of question about what would be different about an IPI, I think we quite sort of inspired by the examples of the IPCC, that if you provide robust kind of agreed scientific advice on kind of how we're doing on a particular issue, as the IPCC does on the issue of climate change, we think that has huge value in kind of changing policies and focusing the public's attention on the emergency at hand. Just like the climate issue, we think that this inequality issue is such an emergency, and I think kind of something like the IPI, I don't think has been done before, and I think kind of our sense is that it would have a huge impact. And I think the sense we get from kind of all of the engagements we've had, including this one, is that people do think that having that set of independent kind of robust evidence would change things somewhat. So, kind of over to you, Jayati.
Thanks. Very quickly, I first want to just all go back to that issue about growth. The reason we put it in the report is because there is so much belief among policymakers that you need inequality for growth. That's one of the things we're constantly told, that it is one of the things that will incentivize economic growth. I personally am completely with, I think, the discussion that has been so far, that actually growth is not the point. The size of the economy is irrelevant. What we really have to do is create an economy that works for people and the planet, right? When we were doing, I was on a council in the WHO on the economics of health for all. And what we said is we need an economy that delivers health for all. So let's think of the things that we have to do to make that economy deliver health for all. Similarly, we really have to think of the economy as subservient to the needs of people and the planet, rather than people and planet serving the economy, which is the way currently policymakers think of it. And that is compatible with higher growth, lower growth, degrowth. I think that part is a distraction. I don't think we should be drawn into the distraction. Does it have to go down? Does it have to go up? I mean, GDP as an indicator sucks. We all know that. So let's stop obsessing about it. Let's instead think of the essence of what an economy should be providing us and the different ways in which we can make the economy provide that. So I basically, just in terms of, I think, the approach that our committee had on this particular issue. On the Safia and Laura point, I couldn't agree with you more. Imraan is correct. We were very inspired by the IPCC, but we also recognize the IPCC also had these problems of reproducing inequality in terms of knowledge creation, or who gets, if you like, the ability to decide positions, etc. And certainly our attempt will be, we are not the only deciders in this, right? We are just part of a broader system, but our attempt will be to try and make a panel that is inclusive enough and has enough different voices, including intergenerational, but also including different locations, not just gender, but also different categories, shall we say, social categories of people, to be able to recognize different kinds of inequality, which often, if you are in a particularly elite position, you don't even recognize that inequality. So that would be our attempt. I don't know how successful, but certainly I think both Imraan and I and the rest of the committee, that's how we would like it to go.
Thank you. That's really very powerful. I've been wondering, listening to you, and I'm just throwing it in, I've been obsessed with rotating credit and burial associations my entire life. These are what ordinary people throw up for themselves to solve problems. And I find it really interesting that even when these things reach a magnitude that's really important, either they become sort of political threats or they become invisible and governments don't see them any longer as really where agency sits. And so I'm curious whether there's any room to look at what people throw up for themselves in terms of solutions and how to find ways to recognize that. Safia, you have your hand up.
Please, thank you so much. Thank you for the space and thank you for this discussion. I think just to clarify what I was sharing in the chat, there's the research evidence portion of the work, and then there's the accessibility, why it matters portion of the work. So just being mindful of that as you go through this process. Absolutely, I believe the fact that we're having these consultations just shows that there's a value alignment in this process from the get-go, which we deeply, deeply appreciate. But carrying it forward, the fact that young people are committed to using paper straws, but how much of an impact does that have if Shell is polluting the Niger Delta and base titanium is bullying a Kenyan conservation on the borders of Somalia, things like that, So making sure that it's accessible and there's these multiple voices that are championing it. We want to see a space where if somebody is running for office, we want to know what their inequality policies will be from the get-go, and bringing young people into that space and giving them that vocabulary to speak to inequality and why it matters. And the fact that if you think you are helping somebody at the four-way stop, as South Africans, we have one of the highest Gini coefficients in the world, But I can see what's around me, but structurally, systematically, we need change, and that needs the masses. So just making sure we're aware of that as we go through this process. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best with this work. The report has been so stark to read. Like, it in theory, we see the wars, we see the conflict, we see escalating injustices and all of that, the heightening climate crisis and food insecurity, for example, but to see it in black and white has been very, very stark. But not everyone will read the research, so we have to tell the stories is very important. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Decider, do you want to come in with your comment? Otherwise, Frederica. Thank you for that, Safia.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gary, for your questions. Indeed, it's something that I mentioned previously. There are a lot of experiences linked to the way in which people organize themselves, despite the state, despite the market, what it's called in the global, in South America, popular economy. And it's linked to the social solidarity economy, something that Yvonne mentioned previously. And I really think that there's barriers in the legal framework that creates the difficulty to grow, to scale. But it doesn't mean that social solidarity economy as a real process, as a real infrastructure, don't give us lights about how redistribution and other factors about common goods, collective property are working. It's not only about trying to find ways, but to recognize the ones that already works on that sense. And I take the, to keep it short, also want to highlight other issue that was mentioned. The report identifies the critical role of politics public policy and the state. And it means that report and EP needs to have as a main target actors the governments are the ones who make the difference maybe in this context of multilateral crisis, the way in which the global arrangements, the global contract is being dismantled in this moment. I left my intervention there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other question? Anybody else?
Sesai, did you want to come in with your comments?
Hi, it's Say. I don't know that I have more to add beyond what I dropped into the chat. I think that we have a tendency as very smart people to get caught up in the analysis and to not spend as much time thinking about the things that we actually need to change and the power building that needs to happen in order for these changes to come fully into effect. We all want a better world, but I'm interested if anyone who has joined today has thoughts about who we actually need to influence. I saw someone earlier say that we're never going to convince the 1% to change unless we reorganize and decide to force those changes. I agree with that. And so I think it's a question of who do we influence? What institutions do we use to do that? What is the power that needs to be built behind those institutions? So I'm interested in having that conversation. If anyone wants to continue that conversation, feel free to reach out to me.
Okay, thank you.
Jayati or Imraan got a comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I would just say, yeah, we completely agree with you, as I said, that that's really what we need to do, which is why what we're hoping is that one of the working groups is actually about policies, and policies don't just happen out of the blue. They happen because the forces that demand them are so strong that even the most, elite biased governments cannot ignore them anymore. So I guess that's what we're hoping for. And that has to be a much more large collective job with many more alliances, coalitions, much greater mobilization. What we're just hoping is, it's one little pebble into the stream, and let's hope that it creates some ripples.
Yeah, just to add, I think what I can completely agree with Jayati. Our report and whatever an IPI could do is but one small part of a much larger fight. And let's not be shy to say it. I think it's a battle and a fight for a more equitable world. And I think it's going to take everyone's energies in all sorts of kind of different spaces, kind of for that to happen. What the IPI can do, as I think we've done in the report, is to provide the trends, to provide the data, to provide the analysis. That has to be used and fought out, I think, in the kind of in the real world. And I think kind of a number of the responses have kind of emphasized the importance of human agency kind of in this. And I think it links to the point that we make in the report. This is a choice that has been made, and I think the more members of society challenge the particular set of choices and force change, the more likely we are to succeed in that change.
Yeah, Tamsin, if I may, Imraan and Jayati, I do not mean to diminish your work in any way. It is incredibly important, and this panel will play an integral role. Imraan, I'm glad that you are voicing the fact that this is a battle. I think sometimes I get frustrated because the forces on the other side don't wait for the analysis. They just go ahead and act. So what I really would love to know from Imraan and Jayati what do you need from us to make sure that this panel actually gets breathed into life?
Can I just say, as far as I'm concerned, any life that is going to come from it cannot come from the panel. It has to come from all of you and from people like you all over the world. It cannot, the panel is just a means, that an instrument that you can use in that larger battle.
Can I, while you're answering that, Jayati and Imraan, one of the things that I'm curious about is what novelty in how you constitute the panel can you envisage? How much latitude do you have to do things differently than they have been done? And is there a way to skew things the other way? Let me put it as bluntly as I can.
I think the process of setting up the panel is kind of itself not an uncontested issue. You know, one could easily have ended up with an IPI that is based in kind of in a university, in a country kind of in the north that does a large amount of sort of kind of analysis, but where the kind of output of that work is not really sort of translating into real world action, is not kind of representative of kind of inequality experiences across the world, is not even thinking about the inequalities in the research about about the issue of inequality. Let's be frank. Let's be frank about it. In that knowledge production itself, there's a huge inequality, and I think in both kind of Jayati and my engagements and members of the panel more broadly, I think we've been kind of challenging each other. We had quite a big debate about making sure that the IPI is not reproducing inequality. We could easily have ended up with that sort of solution. So kind of, I think my kind of response would be that we kind of really shouldn't see the setting up of this institution to be something that we would leave to a group of specialists. Look, someone has to do it. We've been asked to do it. I think we would find it extremely sort of valuable to have a lot more of these sorts of engagements. And I think we need to take the points that we've heard from everyone, from kind of everyone here, back into the IPI process. I think we're very, very committed to making sure that the IPI deals with inequality in all of its complexities, rather than make it a technical issue which is solved by a group of technical experts.
Yvonne?
Yes, I just put in the chat today. There's a meeting in Geneva, a meeting organized by Olivier de Schutter, the UN Special Reporter on Poverty and Human Rights. And very interesting document. And I suggested this group to examine that report also, because it's very good. And also it shows a path to some of the questions that were raised today. How do we move towards something different? He does mention social solidarity economy, for example, and other things. So in other words, he goes further than discussion today on how we could maybe implement changes. So I suggest looking at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't you post the link if you
It's
Yeah.
on the, I put it in
Okay.
the chat.
Okay, great.
You'll be pleased to know that Olivier is joining us in Johannesburg over the weekend when we, so he's part of our consultative group.
Samantha. Hi.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I know I've been MIA, but it's good to be back. So I think I just really want to appreciate Imraan, Jayati, and everybody else who are putting together this report. I was part of the last series of discussions, and I haven't had an opportunity to be in for this one. But when we were transitioning to begin this set of discussions, I had a very strong inclination that we really do need to think about the meso level of impact, because the problems are at the macro level, and it can get very frustrating when you're seeing that the whole world, if I want to make it catastrophic, is hurtling towards a disaster, and we can see it from where we sit in our different capacities. And we need that to get into action. I think we needed to pay attention. We needed to stop the presses. Something big is happening, but we can't expect to have the change at that level, regardless of how big you are. You can be the largest organization, the smallest. It's very hard to change something at the macro level. And so for meaningful change to happen, and this is why I like these discussions, is there has to be that change at the micro level, which is just the individual beginning to shift their consciousness. But I felt that I had been doing a lot of work at the micro level, but there were not enough people at the meso level. Because at the meso level, we're building momentum, we're building strength. And so my feedback had been, could we begin to see people who are in this space and what they're doing at the meso level, not necessarily the macro governmental multinational level, but meso level. And so I think this is a very beautiful step in the right direction. I think that you have put in significant time and effort to be able to deliver this report. And I think that this is a gift that you're offering to us. And when we are operating from the perspective that the earth is hurtling towards a disaster, any solution will appear inadequate. If we're thinking of the problem at the macro level, it's not going to be enough. It's not enough. What do you mean? What do you mean? I mean, it's going to feel like we should be doing more. But I think it's very important to acknowledge that we are doing something. And this is the something. And how can we take that something and make it useful to us at the micro level? How can we take it at the meso level and make it useful to us? Or and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Yvonne was saying, what are other people doing at the meso level that is complementary? And so I really just wanted to give some congratulations to both of you and everybody else who's doing something at the meso level, because that's where we're going to have some momentum building, and we do need this momentum. Thank you.
Reaching the end, so I want to make sure that both Imraan and Jayati can kind of give us some concluding energy and agency to some extent. But if there are any last questions anybody wants to ask, otherwise I'm going to go straight to, shall we start with you, Jayati?
Well, I really don't have anything to add. I want to say that the energy and agency comes from discussions like this. I think certainly I've learned a lot from this, and I think we will take a lot of these points into our discussions day after tomorrow in Johannesburg. So this has been very useful for us as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Imraan.
Yeah, agree. I think this has been kind of enormously useful, and kind of thank you all for your inputs, and please feel free to to continue to engage us on these issues. I think Samantha captured it quite well. There's work that has to be done at a kind of a variety of levels if we're going to have some success in changing kind of a pattern of kind of a pattern of production and kind of production, distribution, and consumption that is highly unequal and really skewed towards the interests of a very, very sort of powerful elite. I don't think kind of any one of us can kind of individually or with our own organization sort of really take that battle on. But I do think collectively, and there's many instances in history where these forms of collective action have resulted in significant change. And I think that we live in a time where it's quite easy to feel despondent. We're kind of really hopeful that the report and the process of setting up the IPI is creating a momentum for us collectively to kind of to really challenge the kind of the dominance of a particular kind of small elite to really control the system, to push us into a situation where the kind of entire existence of humankind is now open, kind of open to a huge amount of risk. And I think unless we have that collective action, we're really not going to succeed. So kind of looking forward to to learning a lot more about everyone else's work and how we can use this IPI process to to help you in that regard.
Well, thank you both for really giving us some very interesting information. And frankly, we wish you all the best next week in Johannesburg. Next week, we also have the open dialogue on the invisible economy, inequality, informality, and democratic space. So it's really a continuation of this conversation. So please join us next week.